Good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum tonight. And I'm pleased to welcome you on behalf of our many sponsors. But first, I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Megan O'Sullivan, and I'm a lecturer in public policy here at the Kennedy School. As I mentioned, we have several sponsors tonight, and I'd like to begin just by acknowledging them. First, the Belfer Center and the Harvard Kennedy School Arab Caucus, the Harvard Kennedy School International Security Professional Interest Council, Harvard Circle of Women, and finally Harvard's Islamic Society. So we thank them for sponsoring our event tonight. Tonight we're here to talk about a subject of major interest to the United States and to the international community. We're here to discuss an area of the world that the new Obama administration has called the greatest military threat, the greatest national security challenge for the United States and its allies. And that, of course, is Afghanistan. This is a subject, Afghanistan is a subject to be broached with great seriousness. Many of the trajectories today in Afghanistan are negative. President Obama was recently asked if the United States was winning in Afghanistan, and he said quite bluntly no. Now is also a time where we all have an increased appreciation for the interconnectedness of the challenges that Afghanistan faces and the challenges that Pakistan faces. And now is a time where our country is debating the nature of U.S. goals and the duration and the type of commitment that the United States can make to the Afghans to help them rebuild their society. Is the U.S. able and willing to make the commitment necessary over a potentially long period of time? And if not, what are the alternatives? As many of you are aware, the Obama administration is in the midst of a strategic review. There are multiple reviews underway, and the hope and expectation is that these reviews will come together before the NATO summit in early April. Tonight, as events and people discuss this issue in Washington and Kabul and Brussels, we have a very special guest to talk about these issues with us. I had the pleasure of working on Afghanistan for many years, and I have traveled to the country many times. I have seen the resourcefulness of the Afghan people, and I have seen the dedication and desire that they have to remake their future and to rebuild their country. And I have been impressed by their desire to work with the international community on many, many complex problems. No one, I think, embodies these qualities of Afghans better than our guest tonight, and our guest is Afghan Ambassador Syed Jawad. Ambassador Jawad is the ambassador from Afghanistan to the United States. And he and I joke, I think, that he probably has the largest portfolio of any ambassador that I know. He's in charge of his country's relationship not just with the United States, but also with Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia. So I like to say he's in charge of this entire hemisphere. He's been doing this since December 2003, and during that time, he served as a superb bridge between our two countries. But he's been working as a bridge between our countries for much longer than his time as ambassador. He actually settled in the United States in 1986 and received a master's in business administration from the University of San Francisco and worked for a number of years in that city with a number of prominent law firms. As with many people, 9/11 changed the life of Ambassador Jawad. He left what I imagine was a very comfortable life in San Francisco and returned to Kabul only months after the event on 9/11. And there he became a senior advisor to President Karzai. And he worked with President Karzai very closely as his public face, as his press person, but also as a consultant and an advisor on strategic issues at a key moment when Afghanistan was thinking about its institution. What is its constitution going to look like? What are the armed forces going to look like? Ambassador Jawad had a role in thinking through all of those tough questions. Now, all this time, he kept his close relationship with the United States, these initial years in Kabul. If you had met him back in these early days in 2002 and he gave you his business card, it was crammed with cell phone numbers. And you thought, this is a guy who really wants you to be able to reach him. And at the time, as I could say, it's an understatement, it's not that easy to reach anybody in Afghanistan. But certainly, if you were persistent enough and you could get an open line, you could reach Ambassador Jawad, and then things would happen. I'd really like to say again how happy and pleased I am to be able to welcome him to the Kennedy School tonight. And I'd like to turn the podium over to our guest, Ambassador Saeed Jawad.
Thank you very much, Megan. It's great being here. Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to be part of this forum. And I would like to thank the University, John F. Kennedy School of Government, the Institute for Politics, my friend Megan O'Sullivan, and many friends who have been around here for making this possible for me. Mr. Mayor, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me. It's great. For these occasions, I had a German professor. He would say that it's always a pleasure being in a room with people with very high IQ and modest income. And I think this will qualify very much. But speaking of Afghanistan, 7 years after the fall of the Taliban, Afghanistan, as you know, is facing increasing security challenges. And unfortunately, many important accomplishments throughout the 7 years are overshadowed by suicide bombing, by roadside bombing, and security incidents along roadsides and on major highways. And if you look back, you will notice that the United States came to Afghanistan after the vicious attack of 9/11, primarily to destroy the terrorist base in Afghanistan and punish al-Qaeda operative in Afghanistan. And while the system, the state in Afghanistan was systematically destroyed for over 30 years, United Nations, the international community, chose the path of the so-called light footprint. This was not the right footprint for Afghanistan. This was the original sin. In a country that is completely destroyed, you cannot choose to have a light footprint and hope that with a duct tape approach, the country will be built. So, and then the rapid collapse of the Taliban have created excessive and unrealistic optimism. And of course, some of the attentions were diverted as much as resources to Iraq and other crises. The state building undertaken will become very uncoordinated, become ad hoc, and focuses were made on creating parallel institutions without much think and without much planning for the sustainability and substance for these new institutions. And on the security front, Taliban were frankly neither eliminated nor defeated. They were pushed on the countryside. They were pushed into countryside of Afghanistan and in Pakistan. So subsequently, we saw that deterioration of the security situation. There was limited investment in building the capacity of the police force in Afghanistan, and the judicial system did not receive the attention that it should have received. And many very good friends of Afghanistan who were part of the administrations, who were soldiers who were fighting so well and so bravely in Afghanistan, they were asking for attention and resources. But as I mentioned, the mission started with very small focus of eliminating terrorist bases in Afghanistan, and never those who were seeking to build the institution in Afghanistan received the resources that they needed. Someone put it in very well that in Afghanistan we did what we could, in Iraq we did what we must. So this was a big difference from the very beginning. With the limited resources available, everyone tried to do their best. Another aspect that also affected Afghanistan very much was the regional aspect of terrorism was neglected. There was a misplaced trust in Pakistan's military dictatorship to confront extremism both in Pakistan and also help with the fight in Afghanistan. We saw a very dangerous trend that both the people in Pakistan and Afghanistan are paying a heavy price for, which is the Pakistanization of al-Qaeda and the Talibanization of Pakistan. That trend has been very costly for both Afghans and Pakistan and the Pakistanis, particularly the middle class and the educated Pakistanis, the cities that were center of cultures like Lahore or Peshawar and others are becoming very hard even for the ordinary Pakistani citizen to travel or to visit. Then NATO was invited to get involved in Afghanistan, and that involvement of NATO was fairly premature and lacked the strategic coordination that was necessary. NATO presence to Afghanistan initially was an important political asset, show the consensus of the international community for the cause of fighting in Afghanistan. But as far as military coordinations, a lot more had to be taken place before they came in, because they were lacking, and they are still lacking equipment, helicopters, transport capabilities, precision artillery, more importantly, funding for reconstruction. And a lot of them are actually constrained by a number of the so-called national caveats that limit their effectiveness in Afghanistan. And therefore, never actually a unified military, civilian, national, and international coordination and command was created. People came in with different capabilities and different degrees of commitment to help Afghanistan. There was a lot of talk about coordinations, but coordinations only happen if you are ready to be coordinated. If different parties are not ready to be coordinated, an additional conference will not bring the coordination that was needed. In our part too, in Afghanistan, because of lack of resources, we accept this theory of stability versus justice. A lot of the crimes, a lot of the human rights violations remained unpunished in Afghanistan because we had to focus on stability and pay a heavy price of not delivering justice. And as you know, on the short term it works, but on the long term, if you don't deliver justice, then you have neither stability nor justice. And that's exactly what happened in Afghanistan. This also created a culture of impunity for spoilers, for criminals in Afghanistan. Lately, we see a lot that people are claiming that the international community is not succeeding militarily in Afghanistan. Well, that's true, but nobody tried as hard as they should. As I mentioned, we had to deal with the limited resources that we had. We all did what we could. And also in the media, there's talks about democracy in Afghanistan. And this is, I want to make one point very clear, that to build a pluralistic, a prosperous, a peaceful society in Afghanistan is not a luxury for the Afghan people or for the Afghan government. It's a necessity. It's a necessity for peace in Afghanistan, for stability in the region, and for security in the world. And again, I want to make another point very clear. We are not imposing Jeffersonian democracy on the Afghan society. However, we are trying to prevent the imposition of terror and dictatorship. And these two are very parallel, these two issues. A very good friend of mine, Senator Kerry, said recently that we don't want Afghanistan to be the 51st state of the United States. We never asked for that. And I told this to Senator Kerry. If you could dream to have institutions like India, we would be very lucky. So, but to propose that the Afghan people do not demand or deserve peace or pluralism or human rights is wrong, is racist. The Afghan people are resilient, they're moderate, they want peace. If democracy means not fearing the secret police at night, if democracy means not fearing a terrorist burning your school, or having an opportunity for your wife to give birth without dying, this is exactly what every human being demands and deserves, including an Afghan. So some of these statements in the media recently are totally unrelated to the ground reality in Afghanistan. The women of Afghanistan have not forgotten how life was under the Taliban. They will never forget, and they will never go back to these days. So therefore, we very much welcome President Obama's comprehensive plan and a strategy to come up with a new coordinated approach, which will be actually revealed next month in Prague in the NATO summit. And we are very much grateful also that we were consulted about this process. We've had our number of high-ranking Afghan delegations in Washington 2 weeks ago to give our inputs about the new strategies and what their new components should be. The points that we have made, and I would like to share with you, the items that we would like to see being covered in the new strategies are a couple of issues. First, a surge of U.S. troops in building the capacity of the Afghan government to deliver services and to provide protection, and particularly also to eliminate abuse and corruption, to eliminate the sources of the indoctrination and training of the terrorists on the other side of the border, and also end the ideological, financial, and logistical support that the terrorists are getting from across the border. Another important issue for us is making fighting narcotics part of the fight against terrorism. Make it as a mandate of the military and others that to fight narcotics with the same power that they're fighting terrorism in Afghanistan. And the issue of reconciliation, I will talk about a little more in detail because it's coming, especially in the past 2 days, there's been a lot of talk about reconciliation with Taliban. We need to set clear parameters on who we want to talk to and to what extent. And also an increased financial assistance to Afghanistan and improve aid effectiveness is an issue that we have discussed as part of our input to the new strategy. And we very much also welcome the sending of additional 17,000 troops to Afghanistan, particularly those Marines that are going in south in Kandahar will play an important role to provide an environment for security in Afghanistan, because right now we don't have enough boots on the ground, combined Afghans and international and NATO's. The short-term solution is to increase the international forces, but the long-term sustainable solution is to build the capacity of the Afghan army and police force, which is a lot more effective and less costly. Alongside the number of the troops, it's very important also to improve the quality of the troops. Just the number is not sufficient. The quantity and the quality both has to be improved. We have large formation of troops in certain parts of Afghanistan that are not fighting as hard as they should. And they lack the equipment. It's not that they don't want to fight, they are constrained either by national caveats or political pressure from their capital or lack of proper equipments. An improvement of the quality of the troops is also necessary. For us, the American soldiers who have been fighting in the east and the south have proven to the best partners. As I mentioned, we very much value the political asset of having NATO countries with us, but this is a tough job. It's a tough fight. Countries who are coming should be ready to fight in Afghanistan. We have trained our national army up to 80,000 by 2010. That will increase to 134,000. But if you use any calculations, we would need at least combined 350,000 security forces, police, and the army. Iraq is much smaller than Afghanistan and a lot more flat. It has combined security forces of 600,000. We have barely 130,000 combined between the police and the army. By building this capacity, a lot of international soldiers from NATO or the US that are fighting in Afghanistan will be relieved from that pressure, and that the job of defending Afghanistan will be done by the Afghan themselves. And building the Afghan National Army is truly another success story of putting proper kind of investment by especially the United States and some other NATO countries, and the partnership of the Afghan people. So where we have worked together, we have invested resources, we have had very good results. In the areas that has not been enough investment, like police, we're lacking behind. We need to catch up on that too. And again, here also the United States is playing now once again a leading role in building the police force in Afghanistan. Now, on the issue of regional aspects of terrorism, we will not succeed in Afghanistan without sincere cooperation of Pakistan. And today, fortunately, the political leadership of Afghanistan has the best possible relation with President Zardari and the civilian government of Pakistan. It's truly never in the history of Afghanistan the leadership, the top leadership of the country has been so close, that provide a great opportunity, because the people of Pakistan, the political leadership, especially as Mr. Zardari, has been a victim of terrorism as much as the Afghan have been. And the relation with Pakistan has improved significantly. Although even during the time when we had a lot of challenges with Pakistan, when I was asked about our relation with Pakistan, I was telling the story of Mark Twain about Johann Sebastian Bach music. He didn't like Bach music, you probably know that. So when he was asked about Bach music, he would say that Bach music is much better than it sounds. So really our relation with Pakistan has been much better than it sounded in the media, but today it's at a different level of cooperation between the two countries. The civilian government of Pakistan is sincere in their willingness to work with us, but they don't have the capacity to deliver. The army, which has the capacity to deliver, still do not see extremism as the enemy of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the region. They see India as the real enemy. And as part of the new regional approach, more work needs to be done to bring India and Pakistan closer and create more trust between the two countries in order to fight the common enemy of extremism. In addition to the issue of increasing the military presence, an important component of fighting counterinsurgency is to creating hope in job and opportunities. In the past 7 years, despite challenges that we have had in Afghanistan, the average, Afghanistan had a growth rate of 14%, which is very significant for a country like Afghanistan. We have acquired a significant investment in mining, telecommunications, and others, but still, unemployment is an important issue, and poverty still prevails in many parts of Afghanistan. To provide sustainable development, to make the best use of your dollars that are being to Afghanistan, the funding mechanism has to change to a certain degree, and more assistance needs to be channeled through the Afghan government budget. And there are very successful models that has been introduced in Afghanistan. I'll talk briefly about one of these models, is the National Solidarity Program that is run by the Afghan government. Under this program, we have provided $560 million loans for 46,000 small development projects in 22,000 villages. We have reached out almost the majority of the villages of Afghanistan. The way it works, that the village set up a development council, determine their priority, and the government will give them a grant of between $20,000 to $300,000, and they will oversee the implementation of the project, which is usually done by a professional institution. And that since it's their project, there is no security cost associated with it, which is an important component of projects being built by private contractors and companies. The security cost is almost zero for the NSP project. Now, another issue that I would like to talk to you about is the need to talk to the Taliban or engage the Taliban. We welcome, our president have also welcomed President Obama's remark about the need to talk to moderate Taliban or talk to Taliban. The process of engaging with the Taliban is going on for the past 6 years through the Afghan government, and we've been able to bring over about 600 so-called moderate Taliban. But here, if you are doing it in a proper way, in a systematic way, some important work needs to be done. First, we have to determine who is the enemy and who we're going to be talking to, and what are the parameters. What kind of concession are we giving by doing these talks? Politically, Taliban are divided into 3 major groups. There is the Quetta Shura, the city located in Pakistan, that is led by Mullah Omar and his group. We have the Miran Shah Shura, that is led by Haqqani Network. And we have the Bajawar Shura, that is led mostly by Hekmatyar. Now, this is the political structure. What is important for the political engagement is the ideological principles that these Talibans are affiliated with. In this regard, we have 3 types of Talibans. First, we have the ideological Taliban, what I call Taliban with a capital T. So these are factions that are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, with regional terror networks. And as you can imagine, contrary to the comparison that's being made with Iraq, some of the affiliation of these groups with Al-Qaeda is very deep-rooted. It started during the time of the resistance against the Soviets. Some of these groups have been marrying their sons and daughters to each other. So that relationship is much more deep-rooted than the one that existed in Iraq. And this ideological group of Taliban will not rest until they eliminate what they call the West and their allies, us. For this group, the talk will not lead to anywhere. Their mission is clear, and it has to be fought. It has to be eliminated. And because this is there's no ground, there's no middle ground that could be reached with them. And if you look back in 2001, we have always kind of forget the history very, very quickly. In 2001, there was extensive talk with this kind of Taliban. Delegates from different parts of the world went there and to persuade them to turn in Osama bin Laden. Some of you probably remember that. They always said no, that this talk didn't lead to anywhere. They didn't turn in anyone. And and if you look at the example of similar kind of talks or reconciliation in Pakistan, in North Waziristan, in South Waziristan, in Fatah, it's, as I mentioned, it's making life very difficult for the civilians there. Girls' schools are closed in many parts of Pakistan, where the schools have been operating for more than 50 years because of the peace deal. So one has to be very careful. Are we giving room to them to regroup and come back much stronger at us? What are the criteria? Where are the parameters for these kind of mid-talks? For these kind of talks? The second group of the Taliban are the mid-level militias that have been either recruited by the drug traffickers or have been unhappy about the military operations of the United States and the NATO countries, or have been mistreated by our own government, that we have lost them as part of the, and have gone over to the enemy. But these groups can be reconciled. These groups can be through dialogue, through buying off, through bribery, through coercion, we can bring them over, the middle group. And then the third group, what I call the Taliban with small t or lowercase t, or the paycheck Taliban. Young man with no education, no hope, and brainwashed by the enemy, and with the promise of money or paradise or similar things. There's no need to talk to them. What we need to give them is job. What we need to give them a hope. What we need to give them a salary. They're receiving something like $300 a month while fighting for Taliban. So here we can see that where are the groups that we can engage and which are the groups that we can bring over without necessarily talking to them or compromising on the principles. And negotiation with Taliban or negotiation with anyone will be effective if you are talking from the position of strength. And also there has to be, as I mentioned, a line where the concession could be made. Especially when we see in the media these kind of defeatist, these kind of reductionist tendencies in Afghanistan, that things doesn't work and we are not winning. So if we imply that we are not winning, that means the Taliban are not losing either. So if they're not losing, why they should talk to us? The definition of victory for Taliban is much more simpler. As long as they are able to destroy and disrupt, they're winning. And they will not talk to us. So we have to, military-wise, we have to gain actually the upper hands to make sure that they come and talk. Otherwise, there's no need for them to engage us. Therefore, in all these aspects, the issue of talking with Taliban should be a coordinated matter. We will confuse a lot of our friends. People are concerned. Institutions who are working for women's rights in Afghanistan, outside Afghanistan, are calling me or asking me, what is going on? Are we going to compromise on some important principles of human rights in Afghanistan? So one has to develop a very clear plan in a very coordinated manner implemented. On the related issues, that comparison has been made between Afghanistan and the so-called Sunni awakening in Iraq. Again, two different countries, two different history. The pristine tribal formation of Afghanistan that existed for many, many years has been under attack for the past 3 years by the communists, by the Taliban, by many others. Those who have power in Afghanistan, they are the local power holders. They are not necessarily the true tribal leaders. They're either the warlords or the narco traffickers. And to rearm them or arm them, because we spend a lot of resources to disarm these people. It's a very, very serious undertaking that may have consequences for the country if we arm these people. And on the issue of narcotics, very briefly, it is, as I mentioned, if we don't make fighting narcotics part of the mandate of fighting terrorism, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen by itself. And there is no silver bullet solution. There is no magic crop. It is a long-term undertaking that requires development, institution building, and law enforcement. And today, 91% of the Afghan opium is produced in 5 provinces in the south, where we have most of the fighting and where the Afghan government does not have control. 61% of the opium is produced just in Helmand, where we have most of the security challenges and where over 7,000 British soldiers are fighting against the Taliban. So there is a correlation between security and poppy cultivations. And the best strategy fighting narcotics in Afghanistan or anywhere, it's not excessive focus on eradication. It's how we can prevent cultivation. Because once it's cultivated, it's too late. If you eradicate, you push the farmers into the hand of the terrorists. If you don't eradicate, the money of this deadly crop will go into the bank accounts, into the pockets of the traffickers and terrorists. How can we prevent cultivation is by giving an alternative livelihood to the farmers. And that alternative livelihood is not a magic crop being imported from somewhere. No, just create market. Create market for the crops that the farmers been growing for 2,000 years in their home village. They grow some of the best pomegranate, grapes, and others. Creating a market, installing a factory to turn the pomegranate into juice. This just adding value to the legitimate crop will enable us to compete with the illegitimate crop in Afghanistan or anywhere else. On the last note on the issue of corruption, again, very much in the media about Afghanistan and Afghan, it is a serious threat in Afghanistan. We recognize that. And we are working actually to eliminate this. One reason for that is really lack of proper investment in building institutions in Afghanistan. We were paying up to very recently $30 to a police officer. Doesn't mean that if you pay $30, they have to be corrupt. No. But from the very beginning, if you offer only $30, guess who is going to show up to fight Taliban and narco traffickers and others for $30? The guy that shows up has either have ill attention or is totally unqualified. There's an expression, I think it's in Dutch, that says, if you give peanut, you give monkeys. So if you don't pay adequately, proper people will not show up. You have to pay better resources. And, but again, corruption is a symptom of bad governance. It's not the cause of the bad governance. The real challenge is terrorism. And corruption does not lead to terrorism. A guy would not wear a suicide belt and raid a downtown hotel in Kabul because he was asked for a bribe by the municipality. So, but again, this is an issue that has to be addressed. This is our responsibility as the Afghan government. Talking about all the challenges, all the needs to do different things, we should not also lose focus on what's been accomplished in Afghanistan. A lot's been accomplished in Afghanistan, frankly, in the past 7 years. It's amazing how the Afghan society has changed. 6.4 million children are going back to school today. There was less than 1 million, and mostly boys, that were going to something that was called a school. This is changing drastically. We have a very viable parliament in Afghanistan. 28% of the members of the parliament in Afghanistan are women. We have a very vibrant media in Afghanistan. Over 17 privately owned TV stations, over 140, I guess, privately owned radio stations. Some TV and radio stations broadcasting just for women. There's very vibrant society. Schools and clinics are being built in parts of Afghanistan that they have never seen schools there, in very, very remote areas. And women are gaining, actually, their due place in the Afghan society as students, as teachers, as ambassadors, as senators, as candidates for presidency, as entrepreneurs, and others. And all of this has been possible with your support. Truly, we are very, very grateful for what you have done for Afghanistan. When we show sometimes frustration about some of the things that has to be done differently, does not mean that you're not grateful. No, without your assistance, we would not be there where we are. And we are very, very grateful. The new strategy is very much welcome. It's very much needed. But the success of the new strategy depends on how much resources we can allocate to implement that. And how effectively this strategy could be implemented. Again, I am very grateful for your interest and here to answer your questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, as the ambassador mentioned, I think we'll take some questions now. I think you all know the rules, so I don't need to repeat them. I'd just like to have you make sure you identify yourself and be pithy in your question. We'll start here and work our way around.
Salam, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you. So, my name is Ari Cole, and I'm an alumnus of the Kennedy School of Government class of 2008. I've come back home to do networking to help, hopefully, Team Obama in any way that the president needs or wants. That's my prayer. I'd like to say thank you so much for your beautiful speech. And I've traveled to that region of the world when I was a cadet in the Air Force north of Afghanistan and saw the Russian tanks coming in and out. Yeah. My question has to do with my visit here at Harvard. I met the former Bolivian president, Sanchez de Lozada, and also Congressman Ramstad and Mr. Curry at the IOP forums talking about the drug use problems in the U.S. that are generating high fuel for...
I'm sorry, could you get to your question, please?
High fuel for the drug cartels and their violence and terrorism in Afghanistan. My question to you, Mr. Ambassador, and I apologize for being so long, I'm long-winded. My question to you, Mr. Ambassador, is how can we help people in Afghanistan find alternative cultures like vineyards towards, wineries or different types of diversification, to sell your products and also to bring in tourism to your great country to offset people wanting a very low amount of money to do terrorist actions.
Thank you.
Masalam.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good question. As I mentioned, the best approach is to add value to the existing crops. You're buying apples from Chile for your soldiers in Afghanistan. So there's really ways of buying some of the legitimate crops that exist in Afghanistan. And also by adding value, I mean for grape that is grown in Afghanistan, turning them into juice or pomegranate and others, investing on processing the agricultural products so they can reach a better market. Thank you.
Go up here.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for being here this evening. My name is Ziad Haider. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School. You said that you welcomed the Obama administration's regional approach to Afghanistan and even Pakistan. And in that vein, Secretary Clinton recently said that the administration was interested in hosting a conference of all of Afghanistan's neighbors, perhaps at the end of the month. I have a question for you actually related to two of those neighbors in particular, Iran and China. Could you comment on what role those two countries can play and have played in the past in terms of helping your country deal with its problems? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Secretary Clinton have indicated about convening this conference, and by now the date is also said it's on March 21st in The Hague, Netherlands. All the Afghan neighbors, ISAF countries, major donors are invited. Role of Iran, Iran is a neighbor of Afghanistan. We have a lot of cultural, religious, and linguistic tie with Iran. We have been a neighbor for thousands of years. We haven't chosen our neighbors, but we have to live with them in the neighborhood that we are. So our policy has been to engage Iran in a positive way in Afghanistan, to ask both Tehran and Washington to leave their differences out of Afghanistan. Both countries will be better off if they don't compete in Afghanistan. A lot of competition have taken place in Afghanistan during the Cold War in other areas, and we have paid a very heavy price for it. So today Iran is playing both a constructive role, but is making sure that we all are aware of its destructive capabilities too, if they choose to do so. And sometimes they do remind us of that capacity. China is playing could play a bigger role actually in Afghanistan in the reconstruction. But they are very much right now interested to invest in Afghan minerals and others. They are very much welcome. And in fact, we signed a contract with a Chinese company that they're investing $3.5 billion in developing copper mining in Afghanistan. So they are really aggressive. They are interested to develop, and they're very much welcome. They don't like the presence of the NATO so close home, but they realize that they have serious problem with Islamic extremism in their own area. So there is no any kind of love relation between them and those who are fighting the Afghan government.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for coming. My name is Matthew Ogden. I work with the Executive Intelligence Review magazine, EIR, whose editor is Lyndon LaRouche. And I think this is a very important discussion, new strategy for Afghanistan. I just wanted to present the two main things that we're focusing on and see what your thoughts are. One is drug eradication, but a general war on drugs as the center of the so-called war on terror. And number two is regional cooperation, which was just referenced by the previous questioner. On the number one, this includes not only crop eradication and also limiting the trade or the export, but also a strategy to go after the money laundering involved in that. And unfortunately, there has been friction from the British forces stationed in southern Afghanistan against this strategy. And on the second, regional cooperation, I think the question of China and Iran, as Secretary Clinton has raised, is important. Also, I'd like to see what your comments are on Senator John Kerry and also former Senator George McGovern's comments that the troop surge is not a good idea and that we might wind up in the same position that the former British Army was and the Russians.
That was definitely more than one
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
if I
no.
can pick and
I will
choose,
be,
as you will.
no, I will be, I'll answer actually all of them very quickly. Interdiction is the only policy of eliminating narcotics doesn't work. Frankly, if it is like a balloon, you press it in Colombia, it pops up in Bolivia. You press it in Afghanistan, and it goes into Pakistan. So it has to be combined with interdiction, a very important component of that. Majority of the money being made in drug is by processors and traffickers, not by the farmers. And there's a lot of asset available in Afghanistan, intelligence and otherwise, that could be used for interdiction, money laundering, and others to track the shipment of the chemicals, but also the money and others. It's very much welcome by us to focus on interdiction, institution building. Police and judicial system are important component of that. Eradication, as I mentioned, push the farmers into the hand of the terrorists, and also it moves the eradication area from one to another area. But without eradication, it's not also possible. That means we have to have all of them at the same time. On the need for additional troops, it's very clear that we don't have enough troops. The Taliban are really actually much stronger than they were a year ago, and we cannot produce Afghan army and police force overnight. There has this gap has to be bridged by the presence of the capable international forces until we build our own capacity of the police and the army. Thank you.
Saeed, thank you for coming. My name is Mark. I'm from Boston. I've heard some reports in the media about British intelligence agents acting in a covert manner in which they were impersonating local groups and sort of inflaming relations with various groups. And they were actually captured by your security forces, and they were broken out of the prison that they were detained in. Can you elaborate further on that? And is there any transparency or sort of way in which we can sort of discourage some of these covert operations that happen in Afghanistan and throughout history?
I don't know about that particular incident, but generally, yes, there has been incidents of, for instance, of talking with Taliban just by different institutions in countries, especially in the cases of kidnapping. The Taliban did a series of kidnapping cases, and then that country or their ambassador or they will go and talk to them. This is very distractive. It's very distractive because that's exactly what the Taliban wants to accomplish, and also send a completely wrong message. So If there are talks and discussion, as I mentioned, as part of the reconciliation or any other process, the Afghan government or the Afghan governor or the chief of police in the region should be involved. Otherwise, the terrorists, the Taliban are creating this always these kind of propagandas that we are in touch with NATO, we are doing this, and that this is part of this big also propaganda machinery that they operate, and we have to make sure that we don't give them an opportunity to enlarge these kind of, they're generally lies, but we should not give them any opportunity.
Drew?
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being here. My name is Drew Sloan. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School, and I served in Afghanistan in 2004. And my question is, you said that corruption is not the problem, that terrorism is the problem. But if the center of gravity is the average Afghan, to what degree do you think the average Afghan supports the Taliban? Do they do it because they're coerced out of fear of Taliban reprisals, or do they do that because they remember that, at least during the Taliban, corruption wasn't prevalent?
No, well, there's no mystery that the way the Taliban operates is by coercion, by terrorizing individuals, by terrorizing people. So the semi-order that they have created was because of the completely terrorizing people, chopping people's hands, and this is not something that could be done in today's Afghanistan. Corruption is a problem, no doubt that there is a problem, but as I mentioned, it does not lead to terrorism. People might complain because they cannot get actually the judgment that they need for their home or for their land, but nobody will wear actually a suicide belt because of that.
But I think my question is more, do they actually respond to supporting terrorism because out of frustration with the corruption?
No, they don't support the terrorism. They stay quiet because they're not sure of the capability, your capability and my capability to protect them. So because military operation is conducted and you are there, so you are in the region, you're there for a week or 2 days or so, and then you retrieve back to your barracks, and we don't have enough police to move in to protect people. So these people are left vulnerable. Overnight, the Taliban will come in and ask who were talking to Americans, who said to, and they will kill and behead these people. It is the environment of fear that they created on one hand, and the other hand is we are not able to protect them, both the international community and the Afghan government. If we were there for them, they would have easily opted for you and me, because we give them a hope, we give them a school. The Taliban come in and burn the school. And that's why we have to make sure that we emphasize the staying power of the international community and also improve our capability to deliver services, to be there for our people, that they see a benefit. When they are with the government, when they are with the international community, they are better off.
Thank you.
Saeed John, it's an honor to have you here tonight. I'm Nemat Sadat. I'm originally from Afghanistan. I'm here. I'm pursuing a master's degree in journalism at the Extension School. My question for you is in response to a study group forum here at the Kennedy School. It was a program called Who Lost Afghanistan? And in that event, the former Pakistani ambassador, Ms. Malia Loti, insisted that we should pressure the Afghan government to recognize the Durand Line and to sign a formal agreement. Now, my impression is that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda do not recognize borders and will not respect them. Also, it would be considered political suicide by Afghan leader Hamid Karzai or any future leader to recognize this agreement. I wanted to know what your thoughts were, what is Afghanistan's position, and what possible reconciliation can be made with Pakistan, since this British imposed mandate seems to be at the heart of the problem.
Thank you. That's yes. There is a historic dispute over the Durand Line with Pakistan. I think one day both countries must resolve that. It's practically a border there. When you cross, there's different currency, there's a different police checkpoint. But I just want to make one point. It's not the line. It's not the border that's the problem. Give you a quick example, a comparison with the United States. You have a much stronger police presence along the Mexican border than the Canadian border. But a lot more people are coming through the Mexican border, not through Canadian border. It's not how much police forces you have along the border or the border itself, it's what's happening on the other side. What are the push factor and the pull factor that are making people to come here? So that they were online, recognized or not recognized in a document somewhere in the shelf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan doesn't change everything. As long as the training comes and the logistical, ideological supports through the madrasas and other are there. And I give you a prime example is Mexican-Canadian border. Much stronger security presence, but more people are coming in. Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for sharing with us your experience and ideas. My name is Michael Brower. I was a student at this school before it became the Kennedy School, back when it was the Littauer School. I earned my PhD in political economy and government 45 years ago. I am a political economist, and I've been active in American politics and a student of our foreign policy for all these years. I don't know much about your country except what I've read, and two things I've read are that there's extreme poverty and that your primary, practically your only export crop is opium. So I have a question for you. I'm becoming a pacifist. Wouldn't it do your country, the people of your country, and the cause of freedom and peace and ultimate democracy more good if the U.S., instead of sending 30,000 more military troops, recruited and sent 30,000 doctors and nurses and teachers and veterinarians and experts in developing export crops that would support your people?
Short answer, no, because the 30,000 doctors will be taken hostage by the terrorists. Long answer is that we have to do them at the same time. We have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. It's not either or. It's not a zero-sum game. Security without development is not possible. Development without security is not feasible. Therefore, as long as we are facing this ruthless enemy, trying to convince them not to kill because we are building more schools, it doesn't work. Especially a doctor, a school, a clinic is a target in Afghanistan. It's the nature of the terrorism today. Thank you.
We'll take two more questions up here.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Jeff Edmonds. I recently returned from Afghanistan, where I was a trainer embedded in the Afghan army, and my heart goes out to my Afghan friends that are still fighting. One concern that I did find over there that I don't see mentioned very much is the tension within the armed forces between the Tajiks and the Pashtuns. This was something that only became evident to the trainers after living, sleeping, and eating with the Afghans for quite some time. It was, in a sense, hidden from us, but it does seem like an issue to me. It seemed as though there were positions being filled based on whether someone was Pashtun or Tajik. And I was wondering what you think of that, and how can we challenge that to create a very cohesive armed force? Thank you.
The ethnic diversity of Afghanistan is an asset. It's a beauty of the country, truly. It's a mosaic of different colors altogether. But unfortunately, being a traumatized society, a country that's undergone many years of war and violence, the ethnic issues are being abused. You're absolutely right. People still have mistrust of not only the other ethnic group, but even of their neighbors. This is going to be a long process to overcome that. And that's why some of the institutional criteria that have been set forth for the National Army, for instance, are very effective. You move into, instead of a quota by different ethnicity, you move into a merit system. This is going to take some time in Afghanistan. This is going to take some time. But as I mentioned, it could turn into a positive force, like in here, in this beautiful country of the United States. That you see that really the diversity is a source of energy and creations and beauty. But it will be with us till we come out of this war trauma for many years to come.
Thank you.
Okay, I've been corrected. If people are really concise, we can take the last three questions.
Okay, sure. We can take all the three questions and then answer it back to back, so we save time. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Ambassador. It was a pleasure to listen to you today. My name is Mariam Jalalzadeh, and I'm a senior at Simmons College, and I'm originally from Afghanistan too.
Right.
My question, I actually have two questions, very quickly. My first question is mostly related to foreign aid, international assistance. You talked about how the police and the army are being underutilized, or they're not as reformed as it should have been, but you didn't talk about the capacity building of the government as itself without the military component. I'm researching on the U.S. government and the aid the aid policy that they have, and it's one of the biggest donors in Afghanistan. And since it's the biggest donor, it's also mostly criticized for its aid policy. What they've been doing is that the U.S. aid through U.S.
In the interest of time, could you?
Sure. So I'm asking for your opinion about U.S. aid's policy in trying to bypass the government and trying to implement a lot of their projects directly, which actually undermines the government, its legitimacy and accountability. So that's my first question. My second question is, as I see there are a lot of Afghan students studying in the U.S. pursuing their higher education, I wanted to know if you have any kind of programs in the embassy which kind of bring them together or utilize because they have a lot of expertise, they have a lot of experience back at home, and they are doing a lot of research here. So do you have any kind of programs to utilize their talents? Thank you.
I'll answer you won't believe how proud I am to see 2 Afghan students asking questions. And that's not only that. I see some students who work with me and for me, actually, when I was chief of staff in Kabul as interns, and now they're students here. Reshma is here. So, again, those who see that things are not changing in Afghanistan, they should compare this moment with 7 years ago, when Taliban were ruling Afghanistan. Now Mariam is standing here in one of the best schools in the world, asking a question. Afghanistan has accomplished a lot in the past 7 years. And you and I, all of us, Megan, should be very proud of that. On the foreign aid in the USA, yes, there is a history on how the international funding works. And unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with the Cold War and not sending resources to the government is not compatible to today's reality. The fact that USAID is spending the money directly outside the Afghan government budget is not constructive. You're encouraging people to elect their president, their member of the parliament, and others, and that president, the member of the parliament, has no information, has no clue where the money is coming from and where it's being spent. So the most effective way is to either channel it through the Afghan government budget. If you don't trust it, then create a trust fund with some certain criteria. It says you have to comply with these things before you can withdraw money. And this has been done in Afghanistan. USAID is also in this regard changing. They are sending now more funding to the Ministry of Health and Education. When they see capacity, they work with us. On the internship, you're more than welcome. Embassy of Afghanistan is probably among the only embassy probably that's on Facebook. So check our internship program on the Facebook and also online. We have an extensive internship program. We would love to have any of you who are interested. I've benefited so much from internships, even when I was in Kabul, and some of these students came in 2003 to help me in Kabul. So.
I'm actually asking about anything other than the internships, other kind of programs.
Any kind of externship, any kind of programs that we can, if you are in touch with us, there are a lot of projects that you need your research, you need your ideas, it could be done. We will ask you to finish up something for us. You can work with our congressional liaison officers on that too. Thank you.
Okay, let's take them back to back and let you have
Good.
the last word, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Allison Zakharoff. I'm from Long Island, New York. I was just wondering, you touched upon in the beginning that you didn't want dictatorship and you weren't for Jeffersonian democracy, so I was wondering what ruling system you would think would work best to deal with Afghan.
Okay. No, this has been a reference lately that we don't want to impose Jeffersonian democracy in Afghanistan. No, we don't want that. But as I mentioned, basic protection of human rights is what every human being deserves and demands. And more than that, we are not imposing democracy, we are preventing the imposition of terror and tyranny. If we don't do this, others will do. So the point was that the freedoms and principles of human rights are the basic rights of every human being. You can call it something fancy like Jeffersonian democracy, but we have to make sure that the terror and the tyranny of Taliban will not return to Afghanistan in any form.
Thank you.
All right, Christopher Alberg, local resident. So I'd like to comment on, or get your comment on, you say, A, that we have to put justice on hold at some level. B, drugs and corruption comes at the very end of your presentation. It does feel a little bit like an appendix. Now, it's very hard to argue against your point that security is first and foremost in all of this, but under those circumstances where justice is put on hold and B, drugs and corruption is kind of at the appendix, won't you always need that surge of troops from the outside to be able to get through that situation?
No, the reason that I mentioned that we opted for stability and not deliver justice, I was complaining that because of the lack of resources, we had no option but to go for stability and don't deliver justice. And this was when I said that this was wrong, because on the short term, if you go for stability and don't pay attention to justice, you may be successful. On the long run, you will fail delivering stability and justice both. And
They have to be done in parallel.
they have to be done parallel. And an important thing is, and you cannot deliver justice unless you develop institutions, proper court system and others. Because if you insist on delivering justice while you don't have institutions, what you're delivering is revenge, not justice, which starts another circle of violence. This is the point. On the issue of narcotics, yes, as I mentioned, in the areas where we have most of the security challenges, we do have then a problem of the narcotics. So if we succeed on putting the entire country of Afghanistan under the control of the Afghan government and our friends in the international community, we will be much better off. It's very quickly. Terrorism is like HIV that attacks one's body. And narcotics is cancer. So when your body is weakened by the permanent attack of terrorism, you cannot defend yourself. Our police officers are trying to stay alive under a mortar attack. Of course, they are not able to protect somebody's home, somebody's belonging, or resolve some of the disputes, because all they're doing, they're fighting for their living. So when you face the security challenges, it's very difficult to deliver development or justice, any of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Jawad.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.